I haven't done one of these rant videos in a while and I've got a few things on my mind. So I thought, why better not just throw it onto a video and throw it onto YouTube. This will be one of the last videos in the rant series. From now on, they will just be called the Essex Boys Case podcast. So as I said, I've got a few things on my mind, and part of that is from a video that was recently released from Crime Scene to Courtroom, which focused on the pathology reports of the three deceased, Tony Tucker, Patrick Tate and Craig Rolfe, who of course were all murdered in Retton, Essex on December the 6th, or December the 7th if you believe in the Billy Jasper theory. The video also focused on the statement from Linda Wolfe, who worked at TGI Friday, and gave a description of what the three ate that afternoon, and also they were with Peter Cuthbert, who I'll come back to later. So where to start? Mushrooms. There is a bit of confusion over who ate what that afternoon on the 6th of December. According to Linda Wolfe's statement from TGI Friday, she states that Patrick Tate had a mushroom steak and mushrooms on the side. But according to the pathologist, whose name you may recognise, Paula Lannis, it was Tony Tucker that had mushrooms still in his stomach contents. Now this could easily have been a mistake on the part of Linda Wolfe, or in fact another mistake on the part of Paula Lannis, one of many in Paula's career, including not recording a time of death for the murders of Pat, Tony and Craig. But who ate the mushrooms isn't really the point, it's the time. According to many sources, the mushrooms found in Tony Tucker's stomach could indicate that they were killed a long time before midnight. Now, I've seen several reports that say mushrooms do take longer to digest, and as they were going out for a meal that evening, it is unlikely that they would have eaten again. Peter Cuthbert, in his statement, mentions being with the three up until 3 to 4 o'clock the afternoon on the 6th of December. Now, again, I'll come back to Peter Cuthbert later, but with the meal booked for later in that evening at 8:30, which we will again come back to, is it likely that Tony Tucker would have ate mushrooms in the afternoon in the few hours of being home before being picked up by Craig, which was around about 6 o'clock? Does the mushrooms found in Tony Tucker's stomach indicate that they were in fact killed between 7 and say perhaps 9 o'clock and not later, according to the Billy Jasper theory? Billy Jasper says he dropped off Mr. D at around about midnight, 12:30, who returned around about 1:30 in the morning, having killed the three who were waiting in the Range Rover down Workhouse Lane. Now, there are no official sightings of the three after 7 o'clock. There are many statements that see a Range Rover, and there is, of course, the sighting of possibly Craig Rolfe in a pub. But the barman did not know who Craig was with, and that could have been a different night in question. If it is the Wednesday, the 6th of December, that proves within itself that Darren Nichols is telling a pack of lies. There isn't many people that believe in Darren Nichols' version of events, but it is possible to believe that the three were murdered between 7 and 9 and not believe Darren Nichols' version of events. It seems to be, if you believe they were killed later, you're with the Billy Jasper theory. If you believe that the three were murdered before 9 o'clock, at around about 7, perhaps the white van seen leaving the lane at 7:40, 7:50, driving out into traffic, just like Darren Nichols' statement, maybe that was something to do with the murders themselves. Maybe that was the murderer, the shooter, and his driver. If you believe that the three were killed at an earlier time, it doesn't mean that you believe in Darren Nichols' version of events. It just means that you believe that they were killed before midnight, and not necessarily the story that Billy Jasper came out with, which, without getting into the Billy Jasper theory, it's difficult to know whether that's true or not. At the moment, it's like we're in the limbo of the Billy Jasper theory, waiting for this information to come out, waiting for this Sky documentary to be released later in the year or early next year, and waiting for this new book by a certain person who I won't mention. All this information we're waiting for, this just feels like a limbo as such. Waiting to see the information for ourselves so we can make our mind up whether the Billy Jasper theory is true or not. And if it's not, to look beyond that and to try to find another motive or another theory, because it just seems to be at the moment, it's just Nichols versus Jasper. There's no middle ground. But there are a few others that's names seem to be mentioned that just aren't in either of those theories. Now, coming back to the mushrooms, it could just be a simple case of Tony Tucker ate again later on in the evening when he was waiting to be picked up by Craig Rolfe, and he may have just had mushrooms. He may have seen Pat's that afternoon at TGI Fridays and thought, yeah, I'll have some mushrooms when I get in. Or not unless it was a case of Tony Tucker was munching on a bag of magic mushrooms while he was waiting down the lane for whatever reason they were down there in the first place. The fake plane drop, according to Darren Nichols. Or it simply could be a case of the mushrooms do take longer to digest. That's why they were still in Tony Tucker's stomach. Craig Rolfe also having food contents in his stomach, possibly from the meal. Donna Jagger's not mentioning anything about Craig Rolfe eating later when he was at home. But does this mean that Crime Scene to Courtroom on his video has worked out the actual time of death? And it does mean that the Billy Jasper theory is out the window. Is this the case? And whether these mushrooms were in fact the mushrooms from TGI Friday that afternoon. I was speaking about Peter Cuthbert earlier. Peter was there when Tony Tucker tried to attack Nipper with the machete, with the meat cleaver, asking whether he wanted his hand or his foot cut off. Peter Cuthbert, called Coffee by Nipper in his video, pulled Tony Tucker off of Nipper with the help of Craig Rolfe. Also taken out the finance on the Range Rover for the three in the weeks before their death, and was with them TGI Friday for this meal on the afternoon on the 6th of December. Peter Cuthbert and his wife were also asked to attend the celebrational meal later on in the evening of the 6th of December at 8:30 at the Global Net Cafe. According to Gary Jackets, 4 original seats were booked, later on made for 6. From a few different sources, it was meant to look like it was meant to be Pat and Claire. The confusion over who Tony Tucker was going to take, whether it be Anna or Donna Garwood, and Craig Rolfe was obviously taking Donna Jaggers. Peter Cuthbert and his wife turned down the offer to go to this meal because he was working away the next day. And of course, earlier I said that Peter Cuthbert was with them up until 4 o'clock on the afternoon of the 6th of December. Now, the reason I bring up Peter Cuthbert is because in Nipper's second interview that he'd done after his confession about his dad was the killer of the three, or at least told Nipper that he was the killer in the early hours of the 7th of December. Now, when it came to the James English interview, Steve Nipper Ellis states that his dad, when phoning Steve to tell him the news of the murders, stated that it was Tony, Pat and Coffee that was dead in the Range Rover, not Craig Rolfe, because he didn't know Craig Rolfe and he didn't know Peter Cuthbert, but he assumed Peter Cuthbert was driving the Range Rover.
Answered the phone and he's going, they're dead, and he's laughing, and he said Pat, Tony and Pete are dead. Pete Cuffy, Pat, obviously Pat, Tony and Pete Cuffy, not Craig Rolfe. And he was saying Pat, Tony and Pete. Now on the news they said Pat, Tony and Craig. Obviously my dad had got it wrong, right? But he didn't know Pete and he didn't know Craig.
Why would Sid Ellis, or how?
Now on the news they said Pat, Tony and Craig. Obviously my dad had got it wrong, right? But he didn't know Pete and he didn't know Craig.
How did Sid Ellis know that Peter Cuthbert was with the three during the afternoon of the 6th of December and was with them till 3-4 hours before the official murder time, which is meant to be before 7 o'clock, which is what the jury were fed and believed? Peter, within the last few years, passed away. And there was no other interview with Peter on any of the documentaries or any of the news articles over the years. Now, according to Gary Jackets, the restaurant owner, the meal booking for the celebrational meal was booked on Monday, the 4th of December. Now, the warning from Billy Bundle to Pat Tate, warning him that if he was with Tony, that he was going to get it too, came 3 days before the murders, so we would say roughly on the Sunday. The celebrational meal being booked on the Monday for 4 people later increased to 6. So what this means is that the law to get them free down the lane was already set up on the Monday for 2 days later on the Wednesday, the 6th of December, unless it was just a coincidence that they happened to be down a lane on Wednesday when the shooter wanted to get them, which was in the perfect place for shots to be heard and no one to notice because shoots ran later into the evening on the Wednesdays. Not on that Wednesday because William Philbold, the man who runs the shoots, finished earlier because somebody wanted to have a look at his pond. But any shots being heard that evening would just go unnoticed by the residents, who would assume that the shoot had gone later in the evening. When it comes down to the planning of these murders, it would make sense to have killed them earlier than later on, when no one would have noticed the shots. Stephen Rogers hearing shots at 12:30. Now, one of the other interesting things that Steve Nipolis says to James English, he brings up Billy Jasper and says he didn't know if his dad knew Billy Jasper. Could it be the case that the Billy Jasper theory is connected in some way to Sid Ellis? But more on the Billy Jasper theory in other videos to come. But I do believe it possibly could be the case, and that they could have been murdered earlier when it comes to the contents of Tony Tucker's stomach. This, what Crime Scene the Courtroom says, is a bit of a stretch.
And in this video, I'm going to be providing you with irrefutable scientific proof regarding the time of death concerning Tucker, Tate and Rolfe.
Now that is a bold statement within itself, because there could be another answer for Tony Tucker having mushrooms in his stomach. Could it just be the case of mushrooms take longer to digest? That's why if they were killed gone 12 o'clock, he still had mushrooms in his stomach. Is it simply a case of these stomach contents were the ones from TGI Friday? Tony Tucker was killed before 9 o'clock. I say 9 o'clock just as a rough guess. It's 7 and 9. That's what the earlier news reports said. And that was the first guess from the police before they started all their false narration as such. Or is Crime Scene bang on the money and he's got it completely right? Bearing in mind, all of the information has been out there for over 20 years. All I think is, how come no one has ever took this into account until now? How come it's took somebody looking through the statements, looking through the reports, the documents, and then noticing this, and no one has noticed it before now? Surely the Essex police would have seen the pathology reports. Surely TMI have seen the pathology reports. Surely, but I'm not going to mention his name, has seen the pathology reports. These people have never brought this up until now. What's the reason because of that? Is it because it's just too hard to pinpoint down to pinpoint the exact time of death with just the stomach contents, even if it is mushrooms, because they take longer to digest? But in time, there will be more information coming out, so we can make our mind up whether it's true or not. And if there's no truth to what he's saying, and this robbery doesn't look like the motive, and Tony Tucker doesn't look like he was the actual target, it's from Patsy Clark at least, because he could have been the target for many other reasons, because there are many other suspects within this case. Getting back to that on a later video. Also, the ghost sightings, all these statements that we're meant to believe are them, especially Rebecca Carr's statement and Arthur White's and Andrew Reynolds, who says he saw the Range Rover with the three going towards to collect the polo, saw all three at just around 6:05. He was so sure on the time. Well, Pat Tate at that point was meant to be back in the bungalow phoning Claire Carey. That's the reason Rebecca Carr couldn't have seen the three, but she states that she saw them driving into the farm. Now I'm going to be looking at Rebecca Carr's statement on the next Rant video, which will be the last in the Rant series. Beyond that, it will just be called the Essex Boys Case Podcast. Lots of things planned in the next couple of months, so stay tuned. Lots more to come on this channel and the other channels on the Essex Boys Case. And I'll see you soon.